Thank you so much for everyone for sticking around. It's great to see you all here still. So I just want to sort of start it off. You know, you said this was loosely based on very personal experience with your grandmother. Would you care to say a little more about that?
Yes. So my grandmother was a homemaker in the 1950s who developed various rituals of control. She was in an unhappy marriage, and she was an obsessive hand washer. She would go through 4 cakes of soap a day and 12 bottles of rubbing alcohol a week. And I think she was looking for order in a life she felt increasingly powerless in. And my grandfather, at the behest of the doctors, put her into a mental institution where she received electroshock therapy, insulin shock therapy, and non-consensual lobotomy, and she lost her sense of taste and smell. And I always felt like there was something kind of punitive about it, that, you know, in a way she was kind of being punished for not living up to society's expectations, what they thought a wife or a mother should be. So I wanted to make a film about that, sort of like, you know, show her in a way that, you know, her pain didn't go unnoticed. But hand washing is not very cinematic. So I remember seeing a photo of all the contents of someone's stomach who had pica sort of fanned out on a table like an archaeological dig. And I wanted to know what drew the patient to those artifacts. You know, it almost seemed like a kind of mystical experience, like a Holy Communion, and I wanted to know more. So that's kind of how the project started.
Yeah, it's just such an interesting representation of a type of eating disorder that is very much not on the forefront of anyone's knowledge of eating disorders. So it's something I certainly didn't know anything at all about. So it was really fascinating to see that on screen. That's not something you would typically see.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I work with the world's expert on pica, Dr. Rachel Bryant-Waugh, who actually wrote a case study of Hunter as if Hunter was a patient, which is really like an important document for us. But I wanted it to be like, you know, even though this is an unusual compulsion, I wanted it to be like, well, okay, maybe the audience wouldn't do that, but they could see and understand the emotions she was feeling and feel like, okay, I've been there, you know. So hopefully it would feel universal.
Yeah, kind of on that note, how did you get to casting this incredible lead?
Oh, thank you. I was so fortunate that the brilliant Haley Bennett decided to make this movie with us. And, you know, one of the things that's so incredible about Haley is that she can deliver like layers of emotion simultaneously. And Hunter needs to be wearing like multiple masks at the same time. Like there's that first mask, which is kind of the placid smile, sort of mirroring normalcy. There's the second mask, which is like her pain, doubt, am I in this, you know, and the third as sort of her primal self, her true self coming out. And Haley can give you all of that with just like the touch of her hair or the twitch of her eye. And so it was really fortunate that she decided to make the movie. Made the offer, and she agreed. And I'd seen her in Girl on a Train and other films, and I always thought she was incredible, but I felt like she hadn't been given the opportunity yet to really like have a role that would show her the, you know, full range of her incredible abilities.
How collaborative was her character? Is that something you developed together, or?
Well, I'd written the script, and Haley and I had a lot of discussions about the nuances of the script and the characters, and you know, she's really interesting and innovative. So there's all these little things like the gloves, those designer gloves that she has. Like that was Haley's idea, that she has to have these like very specific bathroom gloves, and the hair touching, that was all Haley. That concept happened first, and the voice, that's not actually Hunter's voice. Haley showed up and said, she was like, I'm going to do a voice, and I was like, okay, great. And we did the first take, perfect. You know, like a great actor, they bring all kinds of incredible intricacies and details to the part that you could never think of yourself.
Well, especially because this is, you know, a film, obviously there's toxic masculinity, there's a feminist undertone to it, and you as a man coming to the project, I imagine, like, were you really invested in having her, like, have her voice in it as well?
I was really, you know, it's interesting because I was raised in like a feminist family, and so it was something I've always believed in very strongly in a feminist ideology. And then of course the story of my grandmother affected me very deeply. In my 20s, I went through a period of time in my 20s where I identified as a woman. I wore women's clothing. I had a different name. And that was an incredible period in my life, and it really solidified sort of my feminist beliefs, especially seeing like how the world views female-identified people, you know. And but you know, recently I remember saw a show on Tucker Carlson show where he was all these experts like proving that feminism is no longer needed because sexism doesn't exist, you know. And like I was like, well, you know, what kind of gaslighting alchemy, you know, it's like new, you know, it's happening. But yeah, I was really worried about my male gaze, and like it was something that we were all worried about it, and instead of backing away from it, or just being like, oh, it'll be fine. You know, like instead, my producers, Molly Asher, Bennett, Louie, and I, and really talked about it a lot about how to keep this story authentic, you know. And I was very fortunate to work with so many incredible female artists who really made this story their own. Two-thirds of our casting crew were women, and you know, it was something we hoped would be a story that felt real. So we worked on it a lot.
I'm going to open it up. Does anyone have any questions in the audience? Okay, right here. Yeah. Either one.
Mine's fast. I noticed Joe Wright's name.
Yeah.
I wonder how much he contributed.
So Joe, we were very fortunate to have Joe as one of our exec producers, and you know, he was very much like a wonderful kind of mentor, and you know, I had some meetings with him, and he gave me some advice. I'd long admired his films, so it was really cool. He came to set a couple of times, but he was very you know, he was the perfect kind of artist who, you know, really loved the project and was really supportive and helped make contacts with actors and, you know, helped make, you know, kind of make some things happen. But really he was just kind of like very supportive of me and my vision and was just like, go get him, you know? Yeah.
And my wife.
I think this could be life-saving for a young woman.
Oh, thank you.
Is there something in the credits where they can reach out?
Yeah, that's a really, yeah, I mean, I hope that is the case, that someone can see it and feel that bond and that identification and feel seen. And, you know, I'd like to partner with, you know, various different organizations that are there for people and resources. Yeah, that's a really interesting idea.
I was wondering if you'd talk more about how you chose the objects that she was going to be swallowing.
Yeah, it's interesting. There was never a doubt in my mind of what they would be. Like they were in the first draft, it was all the same objects. Going back on it, I think I wanted each object to represent almost like an emotional memory or a texture of some kind. I chew ice, and eating ice is pica, so I felt like that was something everyone could relate to. But there's also something magical and mystical about ice, you know. So I thought, okay, that was it. And then the marble, to me, seemed like the perfect first act because, you know, there's something about a marble that seems like it has a magic associated with it. It's a talisman of some kind, and it feels like, you know, reminiscent of childhood. There's a moment where you hear like the beach, and like it's like a, you know, whereas the thumbtack is a little bit more of like something, you know, over the edge, a sinister sort of, but yet powerful moment of like a, you know, communication. There's little whispers between them, like a dialogue. The battery, I mean, I knew I wanted that to be like this electrical scene, like where it would give her kind of energy, but yet contain something dangerous. And the dirt was supposed to be kind of like comfort food, you know. But in the end, you know, I wanted to treat the objects with care and sort of sacredness, you know, that each one of them was like a powerful and potent talisman for her. Yeah.
Also, just
like a quiet rebellion that started out like a pebble going down that created an avalanche eventually. And that this was, you know, and it's also a movie a lot about the idea of like, you know, Hunter begins to realize that she's being kind of like used as a vessel, and it's like whose body, you know, is it really? And she kind of by this ritual, you know, kind of reclaims her body. But I also wanted it to be kind of like that the compulsion. A lot of movies that deal with, you know, compulsion and mental illness, they do it in a very clinical way. And I was curious about like how in a way the compulsion could help her find her way to her true self, or her true and rebel from the sort of patriarchal paradigm. So.
There's a question here.
First of all, thank you for the film.
Oh.
I don't know how many people you've met that sort of similar to Hunter's story, but I know somebody. And I never understood that the feminine side of her story, and thank you to this film. I'm beginning to understand what she went through.
Thank you for saying that.
My question is, when she started swallowing things, was that an act of self-destructiveness? Do you think that there was some vestige in her mind that she wanted to kill herself, or you didn't think about that at all?
It's a really interesting question. I think that, I thought a lot about, I mean, there's a kind of a thing that happens sometimes, like if someone is a cutter, say, that, in my research, what I discovered is that for people who do things like that, there's like a comfort in watching the wound heal that is as much of a part of that process, and it can be very destructive, but it's also like a form of control, and it happens when people feel out of control. I have OCD, and I can tell that it's about the world around it. When you feel like you're not where you should be, or you're repressing some emotion, it can come out in these other ways. And it can be dangerous, and if anybody is struggling with these things, I hope that they, find the right people to talk to and the right people to connect with about it. And it also can be an opportunity to ask yourself, like, why am I feeling out of control right now? What's going on in my life, and how can I find a way to learn from this as well?
It was well handled with the psychologist talking to her, getting all these things out of her. Very interesting that interaction between those two.
Oh, thank you.
Take probably a couple more, one back here, and I'll come to you next.
Okay.
Hi, thanks a lot for coming down and
My pleasure.
showing us the film. Question about the end. I kind of thought that maybe I thought maybe it would end with her, following the routine of the film, like of her like swallowing a piece of the aborted fetus. And I was curious if, it doesn't mean that she doesn't, just because we don't see it. So what do you think? Do you think that happens, or
No. But I like where you're. Yeah, my feeling always about the ending was that it's that would have been, it wouldn't fit with her way of with the way the compulsion would work, because at that point she needs the compulsion less, because she's reached a point where she's kind of free from that system, and she can make that decision for herself. It's one of the first moments in the movie where she's like, makes a choice about how she wants to live. So it's less. I see that as less part of the compulsion, and more of like a step towards, she's gonna go lead her life now, kind of thing. But I understand why you were thinking that, and this is certainly a movie where I hope that you get into a space where you're like, well, anything can happen,
Over here?
I just felt like the whole thing was just really impressive, and it's just so moving, and thank you for coming. I wanted to talk about the tone, because it could have gone so dark and so dramatic, and yet you found a tone that I wouldn't call it light or dark humor, but something like it. And how did you kind of figure that out? And also, you got the husband so right. We all know that guy.
Oh, okay.
and so I just talk a little bit about both of those
Sure.
things.
Thank you. So it's interesting because the tone was very tricky to find, and I remember at a certain point, earlier drafts of the script, having it very realistic and very no humor and very and not stylized. And I kind of realized that the material was so intense that you needed something to help the medicine go down in a way. That I wasn't going to reach the people I wanted to reach if it was totally bare bones, really grim. So, and I think that by I wanted it to be stylized at first and then become more and more realistic as the film goes on. Kind of like the more she kind of gains her psychological clarity and moves away from that, and Kate Orsmendi, my amazing cinematographer, she really came with this idea that we would have a very rigid vernacular of the camera direction, so lockdown frames in the beginning and very formal shots, and then we break those rules when she had like key emotional moments or breakthroughs to save the handheld, for example. But the dark humor, like while I did subsequent drafts of the script and it came in, and then with the actors, and I realized, yes, this is the key to sort of walk that line between the psychological horror, the dark humor, and the domestic drama, so that people come in and they laugh and they cry and they go. And I wanted all of those emotional ranges, and I hoped that what it would do would bond the characters to the audience, to the story, and increase empathy. And that's really what I wanted, to be in that experience with her, as opposed to be sitting back going, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Seems like it would be hard to do, but you accomplished it.
Oh,
Time for one more, and then we'll wrap up. Right here.
How much do these films owe to earlier works like those of Chantal Ackerman, and also to a movie that also harks back to Ackerman, A Revolutionary Road, and more recently?
Oh yeah. So tons of influences this movie. Like, Kate and I have like databases of things. Chantal Ackerman's one of my all-time favorite filmmakers. La Captive, Jean Dielman was like, sacred texts to us. Also, Woman Under the Influence, Todd Haynes Is Safe, the films of Douglas Sirk and Alfred Hitchcock, and and The Revolutionary Road. I mean, like, we definitely were hearkening back to those, and Claire Denis movies. And, there was a lot of stuff we looked at and referenced.
Give another round of applause.